Hi, everyone. Welcome to this SDU Technical Vision and Update, where we're supporting coaches and developing players. My name is Dino Laurel. I am a board member for SDU, and I have a young daughter who plays in U8. I'm very happy to have everyone join us today on this call, and we're looking for an exciting session with everyone today. So this is our first coaching live stream. So essentially it's on YouTube. It's our first foray into it. There might be some technical hiccups, but I think for now we've practiced a lot. I think it's going to run really smoothly. A couple things. There is a chat function on YouTube live stream. We ask that all comments are respectful and constructive, and we look for a very engaging conversation today. This live stream is currently being recorded. This session will be available to share sometime following this session. And just some technical information, if anything's happening on the live stream, just refresh your browser and you should be able to see continue on with the live stream. So how to comment really quickly. Whether you're on desktop or using your phone, there should be a chat box right next to the screen. If you type in the message in the text box, you can either press enter or press the send button, and that will let us know what comments you have. Just as a reminder again, let's keep the chat respectful and on topic so everyone can benefit. We want to stay focused on coaching and player development. We want to be respectful, constructive discussions only, no spam or trolling. Disruptive messages will be removed. We do have a moderator team that will be reviewing all the chat questions, especially at the end when we have Q&A. Those questions, we will bring them up onto the screen. So our team will be monitoring the chat throughout this whole engagement. With that said, thanks for keeping this a great space for learning. So what we'll cover today, the first 10 minutes, some intro and housekeeping. And then for the next 45 minutes, we'll have the presentation by Adam and Chris. And then we've allocated about 20 minutes for live Q&A. So with that said, I'd like to introduce our presenters and QA panelists for today's presentation. Please welcome Adam and Chris. I'm going to bring you up to stage right now. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Dino. Thank you for the introduction. Okay, everyone. Appreciate everyone taking a little extra time to be with us this evening. I think what we'd like to get out of tonight's presentation is, have a better understanding of what has been going on, sort of why we've been making some changes that we have, and try and provide a little extra insight as to, what you can expect to see along sort of your players and your children's journeys at SDU under the kind of new technical leadership. So I think in an ideal world, this is something we may have kicked off last sort of August, September, but we felt it was important at this stage to bring sort of our vision to the SDU members, and inclusive of that is a lot of parents, because we've had our meetings over the year with the coaches and volunteer coaches, but often the parents get missed out on this. So we felt it was vital to bring the parent group in for those that are interested, and hopefully at the end of this presentation have a better understanding of what we're trying to do. So I shall forward on. What can you expect from us this evening? So we'll have some baseline introductions from Chris and myself. We'll talk a little bit about the player development philosophy and what we're trying to do, why we're doing it, how we're doing it, and some things that you can expect to see when you're watching your children play. We'll talk about some of the coaching support that we want to bring to our volunteer coaches. It is a volunteer-led system and society. So, some metrics that we want to put in place and have done so already. Chris will elaborate a little bit more from a BC soccer standpoint and the official coach education pathway and how that aligns with what we're doing at SDU. There'll also be a piece from Chris on the player identification process. And again, talking a bit more sort of philosophically and how we see that piece. And the last part will be, sort of some medium to long-term planning of what we hope to introduce over the next kind of 2, 3, 4 years and beyond. My hope at the end of all this is it will answer, a lot of questions that you may have for us. And we'll do our very best to get this information as clear as we can. So I'll try not to take up too much time with Chris and myself, but I think one thing I would like to sort of make as a prerequisite for our experiences is we're very well sort of versed in football, very experienced, and I think both of us have a very holistic approach to player development. So, my own personal background, I've been coaching the best part of 25 plus years now. I started when I was very young. Back in the UK, I've been very fortunate to, not only taken a football journey, but an academic journey as well around physical education. So, I come at a lot of the sort of philosophies that we do from both the teaching standpoint and the football standpoint. And I think sometimes they can be isolated from one another, but I do believe that to understand both is the optimal kind of learning zone. And I think what we try and combine is that kind of expertise of been, active in both worlds. So for myself, degree in physical education, UEFA A coaching license, which is the penultimate coaching license in world football. UEFA Pro license is the only one above that. My education has been varied from the UK growing up into the United States, collegiate, Canada, the English FA, the FFF, which is the French Football Federation. So I've been on a variety of courses across many federations around the world. And then my, kind of boots on grass experience has been with Arsenal Football Club, which is obviously one of the major players in world football. Here locally, the Vancouver Whitecaps Football Club, spent the best part of a decade on and off working with that club on the men's and women's side, boys and girls. And more recently, last couple of years, been involved in national team programming. So was with Canada for a few years and, being a part of the gold medal win in Tokyo and most recently with the Welsh women's national team. So the only reason I reference some of those is I've worked every level of football from grassroots to quote unquote the very highest level of the game. And I enjoy coaching between every level of the game. And there's different sort of expertise that you need to have in there. But I think if it can come from someone that's, worked anywhere in between that range, I think it just makes it a little more believable, maybe of a better word, but understanding that I've not just been an elite coach and I only work with elite players, and I've not just been a grassroots coach and worked with beginners. It's everywhere in between there. So I think that's important in environments such as this, that you have that sort of wide range of experience. I'll do the talking for Chris as well on this one. Chris is someone I've known for the best part of, probably 30 years now. And Chris has had very similar journeys and expertise in the field of football across different countries. Chris has been a professional footballer. He's played collegiate football. He's also combined his academic and his, football specific education and licensing. He has his master's in sport performance coaching. He has his bachelor's as well. He has his UEFA A license, UEFA A youth license, and is a Canada soccer educator. So, this is not self-fulfilling for us. I think it's to give a little bit of calmness that you have two people in your football club that have a wide sort of range and scope of player development across all levels of the game, and we bring a vast amount of experience in playing, in coaching, in teaching, in educating, and obviously what we hope to do is to pass that on to our staff coaches, to our volunteer parent coaches, that ultimately gives everybody the best experience they can have. And for coaches on the call today, that's something I've also spoken with volunteer coaches, that this needs to be a fun experience for you. So, Chris and I are both delighted to be at the club and have enjoyed our, initial several months with the club. It's been very open, it's been very receptive. And we hope that, again, in this presentation, that you have a lot more understanding and sort of calmness and trust in what has been going on and what will continue to go on SDU. So next kind of baseline of coaching staff. So, we've worked very, very hard since last September to try and put together a coaching team for various reasons. When I stepped into the football club, there was 0 technical staff. We've managed to capture some pre-existing staff. We've managed to add in some new staff. The faces that you see in front of you are hopefully some staff coaches that you've seen quite frequently, particularly with training sessions. We, of course, want to expand our staff. We, of course, want to improve our staff. But equally, I'm very proud of the staff that we've managed to put together in our first year of technical leadership. Again, a wide sort of range of areas, expertise and ages. And I think that is something important as well, because there's guys that you see in front of that I've known for 15, 20 years and have worked well at different areas of player development. And then there's some new coaches that are coming through and also beginning their coaching journey that come with some pretty extensive playing backgrounds. And I think what's important for everyone to understand as well, this is not coming down with the iron fist that everybody knows everything because they have a staff jacket on. Everyone's in different stages of their development, and part of Chris and myself's role is to also improve our staff coaches to reach their ambitions within the game, whether that's in a professional setting or grassroots or not. But there's a few more that's not on that list there, but hopefully you're managing to make yourself known to our coaches, again, within your training sessions. So really kind of the meaty part of the presentation now. So when I talk about the player development philosophy, I want to be very clear and provide a lot of clarity in what that looks like. So the first part is, what is the player development philosophy? I believe I've seen this firsthand, and it's been tried and tested and adapted in my own personal coaching philosophy. But I believe the pedagogical process of what we're trying to deliver is really the game changer within the philosophy itself. So I don't mind sharing, several years ago, as part of a coaching course with the French Football Federation, it was 2018 when we graduated from the course, and the French Football Federation had kind of brought in this new education-based football program. And I thought, firstly, I guess to start with that, they don't call any of their coaches within France. They're all educators. And I found that very different, certainly different from the UK. They're not a coach, they're an educator. And when we were sort of able to delve into the details of it, they wanted to hit different learning styles because everyone learns differently, and it's trying to have the repeated action or scenario or principle, but shown in different ways. So the pedagogy that you see in front of you, so if you ever see these acronyms, the PSAM is the pedagogy of self-adapted model. So in Canada, they've taken on more of a small-sided game where the game becomes the teacher. I think there's some pros and cons to it. But essentially where we go with this is they are small-sided games, they're discovery games, but the role of the coach is to create the environment, for want of a better phrase. So the rules, the restrictions, the resources, the dimensions, the number of players, all these such details are what would bring out the theme or the topic of what you're trying to teach the players. We hope that at that point that the game faces the players with multiple repeated scenarios, but in a random aspect. So that's the PSAM. The PTDM is pedagogy, tactical decision making. When we get to tactical work, it can be simple as a decision to make. So if there's more than 1 versus 1, there's a decision. So what I say to the coaches of, if you make a 2 versus 1 or 3 versus 2, there's a decision. A decision can be to pass or to dribble or to shoot. This one is a bit more of what we would sort of traditional stop, stand still, and asking players, but also demanding players of what pictures are in front of them and what decisions can be made. The last piece of that is the PEM, which is the pedagogy execution model. And essentially that's technical work. So if you look at the sort of 3 acronyms there, we have a small-sided game concept, we have a tactical decision-making concept, and then we have a technical. And what we hope is by sort of challenging the players in all 3 of those areas, they're getting all different learning styles, but around the same topic or the theme. So this is something that we've actively been doing this year with our staff. We've mandated to work in, these sort of pedagogical processes, and then we've challenged and asked the volunteers to do the same. So by teaching these 3 components, we're hoping to have that kind of holistic approach to a training session where all of their learning styles, can be hit in one 60-minute session. The big piece in anything, and I challenge any coach, any player, and any time that I present something is, ask the why. Why are you doing this? So when you ask me what I think of a game model should look like, there's the tactics, there's the X and the O's. I think if I've gone on in my own personal journey, there is sort of some principles that I would love players to take on as they get older. And everything we talk about as a player, we talk about for a person. So I want our players to be decisive. I want them to be decision makers, to be confident to make decisions. There'll be good decisions, there'll be bad decisions. The reflective piece of the bad decision is what could be done differently. But I really love players that make decisions and not be afraid to do it. And I think that's something that can obviously transfer to their everyday life. The creative side, the creativity. Football is fun, and it should never lose sight of being fun. And part of fun is being creative and being brave to try things, to make things happen. And again, I go into football and go into life. I think that's a very good pillar for anyone as a person, is to make decisions, but to have the creativity to think outside the box, to be problem solvers, and to try things. And then the last piece, really, which is, for me, the pinnacle of coaching is to be autonomous and not need the coach. And, often it can help when we, sort of become the quote unquote PlayStation coach, where we tell a player, do this, do that, go here, go there. Ultimately, that's not what we're after. Is we as coaches want to show up and give the players the freedom to make decisions, to be creative and do it themselves, and have the foundational experience that they can go out and problem solve live in the game. Ultimately, that is elite level football. The players that can see that and visualize that and execute that are hovering in the top level of the game. And when I say that, I don't care that it means to be the top level of the game. It could be in a Division 3 match, but we have players who are decisive, who are creative, autonomous. That's what we want to see, because players will find the way wherever they want to go, but we want to have these sort of values instilled to them, and that's why we want to do it. And from the pedagogies, that's more likely to create these type of players. So the how piece, which is ultimately going to be the deciding factor of being successful or not with this philosophy. So everything that we do, we're constantly trying to strike the balance of power. So I think it's a really good visual for people to look at, is when we're educating players, is trying to strike the balance between resources and constraints, and then certainty and uncertainty. And I'll elaborate a little bit on that. So resources and constraints are essentially, can you make things a little bit easier for players? Can you make things a little more difficult for players? And when you hit that sweet spot and the balance scale is level, that's when you're, in an optimal training environment, what we would call best practice, so the best session. And the advice that I always give to coaches is, normally when you've hit the right session is when players are walking off the pitch going, oh, is it over? Is it done? Is it finished? Can we do extra? Can we do more? So it's constantly trying to find those challenges to hit that balance of power, that we get it spot on. And then, you know, what I've done in coaching clinics is about in the back pocket of how you help players or how you challenge players. So that's a big piece for me. And then the last bit of that scale is the certainty and uncertainty. So with football and most sports, when you go into the game, there is an air of sort of predictability about it, which is good, i.e. the way we play, what we want to do, you know, the solutions they're trying to find, the movements they make, the type of putt. But there's an uncertainty because you're playing against an opponent who wants to beat you. You're playing against a team that may be stronger than you or faster than you or more technical than you. So there's a lot of factors that have a sort of level of uncertainty. And we want players to be comfortable in both. So also when we're training our players, we want to give a level of certainty, but we want to give a level of uncertainty because that is what the game is going to be. So they're the part of the sort of coaching tools that we want to try and instill, and that's sort of, you know, subsequently will make the players live in these spaces and more adaptable to the game when it comes on the weekend, which is obviously what you get to observe as a coach or as a parent. So the next piece is we come to the curriculum. So with the curriculum, we have sort of broken the age groups down into 3 areas, the U5 to U7. And what you see in front of you here is highlighted in red is a lot of discovery games. So there'll be some technical work in there, which is just foundational work. But the studies tell us and show us that, you know, I think it's maybe like, I think it's 5 times. I should have that on hand, but I think it's like 5 times more likely to absorb information in a game-like setting. So for coaches that are in this age group, I'll send out session plans that have a theme, that have a silly theme behind it. You know, something that a U5 to U7 would find comical or fun or engaging. And essentially in those age groups, all we're trying to do is maximize contact with the ball. So as much one-to-one player ball ratio as we can. Something that's in a sort of fun game-like setting. Example being on the screen there, it's dribbling but collect the shells, and we have like a theme. It's a beach day, and you know, we ask the coaches to be a bit silly and fun in there, but it's all part of the dynamic that makes it a little bit enjoyable because they are kids. What we don't want in these age groups is it to be like the game, you know, like they're watching the Premier League on the weekend. It should be fun. It should be high repetition with ball contact and do it in a sort of fun game setting. But ultimately, we want those kids to come away going that, you know, their training on a Tuesday or a Wednesday is the best hour of their week, and their game day on the weekend is, you know, they're in a different level of happiness, and that's all they want to do. So that's our major overriding objectives in the U5 to U7 age groups. When we get into the U8 to U12, it's where we start to bring in our sort of methodology, if you will, and how we construct the training session. So what you see in front of you, we typically ask the coaches to pick 3 of these concepts. The PEM would be, you know, the skill part, the fundamentals, passing, dribbling, turning, etc. A lot of the time we would ask the coach to move into the PSAM, which is that small-sided game. And it's essentially transferring the skill work into a small game where there's opposition. And that's, again, you know, if I go back to the balance of power, that's then challenging them against opposition. And then do we need to make it easier with more resources, or do we make it more difficult with more constraints? And then the last part of the training session is the match play. And something that we've shared internally with the coaches is, of your 60-minute session, if half of your training session is dedicated to match play, that's okay. Every player wants to go to training, and the first question they're asked is, are we going to play a game? Are we going to play a game? Can we play a game? When can we play a game? And I think 2 parts, it leaves some pressure from the volunteer coaches, but it also gives the players what they want, and it's about being fun and engaging at the same time. So sometimes parents will go, well, I see them, they're just playing a game. That's okay, because the game is the repeated scenarios, the certainty, uncertainty we're talking about. So we're okay with half of the session being a match play. What we're trying to challenge the coaches with is in that PEM or the PSAM, and or the PTDM, can you be a little bit creative in that space to try and challenge the players over a certain topic or skill set? So this is what we'd like to operate between the ages of U8 to U12. What that looks like visually for parents in particular is, the PEM is technical work. So what you might see again on the screen is two players back and forth, passing the ball, control pass, right foot, left foot, inside of the foot, outside of the foot, foundational technique work. With the tactical side of it, in the picture showing, you've got a 3v2, but could quite easily be a 2 versus 1. Something that provides, decision making with a level of certainty. So, 3v2 to goal, there's probably half a dozen scenarios that could happen in that moment. And then we would be a little more, could you have done this? That didn't work. What could you have done differently? Or next time, look for this. And then we go into the PSAM, which is a game, small-sided game. Can be goals, can be zones, can be targets, can be players, can be whatever. But there's the game, it's reversibility back and forth. As we move into U13, there's a slight difference. Is what we say now is we're going to start with the PSAM, the small-sided game. And again, as you go through the older age groups in player development, the older they get, the harder it is to, isolate 10, 15, 20 minutes to technical work, just technical work, i.e. let's dribble around the cones and, and work on our dribbling skills. We hope in the U8 to U12, those foundational years, they have the prerequisite technical work. So when they come into training, we can start with a game. And again, you talk about the players' enthusiasm levels. What's better than coming to training and starting with a game? So the players immediately activated, they're engaged in the session. The coaches challenge the game by setting up the environment, and it's off to a frantic, high energy, high tempo, high repetition game. When we go into the PM or the PTDM here, the PM for older age groups will be technical work that's more geared towards the group. So, i.e., it's not back and forth passing. It's now, we play to the striker, we play back to the midfielder, we go to the wide player, and starting to have that technical coordination between players. And again, we talk about the match play piece. You want to spend the last 30 minutes practicing game, do it, no problem. Visually, where it sort of differentiates between the younger age groups. So really, we just look at the PM. So the example before was, passing back and forth. This one here has a focus and a purpose around the group. So in the image shown, it's, you play into one striker, he lays it back. You play into the space and the other striker works in behind. It's a coordination where player 1, 2, and 3 have to work with each other. And that's really the main difference in the methodology, if you will, as we move up the age groups. So then we go into the curriculum. So what we've done this year is every single week, curriculum will come out to the coaches. Session plans are sent to each age group that we have in the club, to the club coaches. So the U5 to U7s will get, their silliness session plans with a technical focus. The U8 to U12 coaches will get their ones, and then we challenge a little bit more with the U13 above, that they'll do some more complex stuff as we go on. An example here of one of the training sessions that we had before Christmas, based on our technical plan and a game plan, is, we will start with a ball-orientated warm-up, and you can see in yellow there that the theme for the session is combine and use overloads. Okay, and the session will be designed around that theme in the different pedagogical processes. So this one here, a PEM, it's technical work, it's repetition. Then when we go into PSAM, we have a couple of games. So PSAM, reversibility, there's two goals or targets or actions or ends, and there's low numbers and there's a high repetition of the repeated scenario. So the example shown, so in the 2v2 at the bottom, there's a fixed 2v2 action, but there's different decisions based on time and space. Where is the opponent? Where is your teammate? Where is the space? Where is the goal? So they're all decisions to be made. And then what we challenge the coaches with is to strike the balance of power is how can you make that game easier or more difficult based on the success of your group. So maybe a 2v2 is too difficult, maybe take a defender out and we go 2v1. They're all type of adjustments, or maybe there's a 2v2 plus a neutral player. Examples like this are what we try and create for the coaches to help them with their training session. And again, we get into an example here, another PSCM, and then a match play scenario. Okay, so go back to the pedagogies, hour session, you might hit 2 or 3 different pedagogies, and it's a highly productive, highly intelligent, high repetition training session. And this is something that's sent every single week to our coaches and have done since the first season. So the next piece we'll talk about is the coach development side of it, and how we sort of support our coaches with the curriculum, with the methodologies, with the pedagogies. So a big thing that I've introduced in all the clubs that I've worked at is having coaching clinics. And I think the only downside of coaching clinics is we always ask the volunteer coaches for more time. And we understand that it's not always possible. This year has been a phenomenal response. I think almost every coaching clinic that we've held in person has been around the 20 plus mark, which is fantastic. And what that shows me is we have enthusiastic coaches who want to make a difference. And that vision is no different to mine. You're all parents. You want your kids to have the best experience. And the coaches are there because they want to give the kids, including their own, often the best experience. So my job is to come in and provide that oversight to give them the best experience that gives the best experience to the players. So as you can see, since September, we've run coaching clinics once a month. Most of them have been in person. We've had a couple that have been online and Zoom, and that one gets sent to a wider audience, of course. But example being, they come in, volunteer their time, and they get presented with a session and an on-field session and a follow-up video of the session that's been recorded itself. So what we see in front of us here is there'll be a presentation that's sent to the coaches that sign up. The one in the middle, we can't quite see there, but that's a video. That's a Zoom one that gets sent out to all the coaching staff, whether it's volunteer or club staff, and then videos will be sent. What we'll do over time is we'll build a best practice library that these will just be fixed in, that anyone can go and view at any given time. So we hope from a coach standpoint that you get the curriculum, you get the methodology, the pedagogical processes, you're receiving additional coaching clinics and videos and online content that we're trying to give them and you, for those that listen, the most confidence that you can to pass on to your players. So we've been really proud that we've been able to deliver a lot of that to the volunteers, and I hope for those on the call that's been felt very well in those sectors. Lastly, the mentorship piece. So what we've done this year, again, coming in, we wasn't blessed with a large coaching staff to begin with, so we had to sort of target this quite strategically. So phase 1 of our mentorship is we wanted to have club staff support on field that were there, not putting pressure on the volunteer, not taking over the volunteer session, checking in, asking if they need any guidance, any support. And that was sort of phase 1 early on in the season. They're ready to jump in if and when needed. They're ready to cover. If a coach is struggling or wants advice or additional support, they're there. And that's something that we started the season out with, and also then to receive feedback of what the volunteer coach may need. So that was the on-field presence. Phase 2 was more to go and deliver training sessions. So, our coaches also were eager to go and deliver sessions. What we hoped in that part of it, there was a bit of observation from the volunteer coach, that they could watch staff coach do it and, not stand there in envy of the coach, but more of collaboration, that they also get to view and observe and critique and change. And one of the phrases that you'll often hear from me is every coach is a thief. and you take something from someone. And I can tell you, honestly, I've been at the field this year, and I've seen several sessions or parts of sessions where I've took something from a volunteer coach and go, I like that, that's great. You know, or I could change that a little bit different to do this, that, or the other. And for me, that's a big part of what coaching is. And so it's not about being perfect when you go out there. It's about adapting to the day, adapting to the needs of the group, but also feeding off each other. And that's what we wanted to provide to the volunteer as well, under a little less pressure, delivering and watching the SDU staff. So that's something that we've done in phase 2. And we were, you know, I think that was very well received as the season went on, and greater expectation for our coaches to go and deliver and be around the volunteer in a different context. And then the last piece has been more player identification. Obviously, we've had a little kind of dip here with, you know, the weather that we've had, but we've gone into the last piece of really just trying to support the volunteer and observe the players in that type of setting. So what we hope over the course of the year is, you know, there's the support for the volunteer on field if needed, if and where needed. Then there's the direct support of running sessions and mentoring and collaborating. And then the last piece is just kind of identifying, evaluating the players, and also as we look into placement for next season and where we kind of see the long-term identification piece, which Chris will talk on a little bit later on. So at this point, I'm sure you've had enough of my voice right now. I am going to pass on to Chris, and Chris is just going to talk a little bit more on the kind of official channels of the BC Soccer Coach Ed pathway.
Yeah, thanks, Adam. Thanks all for making the time tonight. As Adam echoed, obviously we appreciate your time and it's valuable. So we'll try and be as fast as we can with giving the information that we want to share with you tonight. Just from me personally, working with a club in the last sort of 6 months here, I've been brought in to work with the academy, with the coach education and the player identification piece. So the latter two are the items I'm going to cover today. But what I just want to make you aware on the formal coach education is there are requirements that are set with Canada Soccer and BC Soccer, which are the governing bodies in this location. And as a member of that, with South Delta United being a soccer club in the system, there's certain requirements that we need to work with to make sure that our coaches have the safety training and have the technical training as well. So with myself and Adam coming in at the time we're sort of looking at, right, how do we work with a club and put on, you know, the appropriate training at the appropriate time. In an ideal world, the technical components, which are the theory based and the practical pieces, will be all shared with you and prepped with you and delivered prior to yourselves, you know, stepping onto the field for your first experience or the start of the season. So there's a few areas that we're working on, but what I want to just target today as a sort of high level piece is number 8 on this list, which is BC Soccer's policy on the training components. Talks about the theory with Canada Soccer. We did share some communication to say, look, here's a window of time. The club have been fantastic to cover the cost of the theory. And so you can log into Canada Soccer's website, take the age appropriate theory component. That then sets you up to register for the practical. And that's the on-field piece. So I'll speak a little bit more to the on-field piece on the next slide. Adam, if you just help me with that. So some of these might be familiar with you, those that have been in the system for a while, working with your kids, you know, from the entry level, you know, all the way up into the teenage years, which is fantastic. But what Canada Soccer have done is try to give age appropriate and specific content that will help the coaches work with the ages of the players, you know, they're working with day to day and interacting with. So the practical piece, I'm able to deliver. And, you know, we've put some courses on and we haven't filled them due to some logistical pieces, but just recently we delivered a Soccer for Life course. And I think what was really pleasing for me is working with South Delta, being the BC Soccer learning facilitator that can deliver this formal education. It just starts to build more rapport with the coaches that are attending those, and we can tailor it a little bit to be more specific to what South Delta needs from a coaching perspective. So we had, as I said, our most recent course last weekend, and it was really, despite the weather and the rain, really positive, because we got through the formal education that's required, but then we're able to have those discussions that are personalised to South Delta. Where I'd just like to leave you with on this one is the runway that we'd like to tackle, as I said, in starting for fall winter 25-26, is making sure that, for example, if you're a U11 coach and you haven't got your learn to train educational piece yet, you'll be prepped before you step onto the field in September 2025. And what I'd like to add, just building off Adam's work with the in-house coaching clinics, is a lot of clubs provide the formal education because it's a requirement. Not necessarily all clubs provided the add-on in-club component. So I think it's really great that if you're able to, and appreciate your time and commitment, but if you're able to be a part of as much as that we can provide, then we're all here to try and work together and help the players on the field. So moving into the player identification piece, what we've got here is a system where we're trying to not just have it a overarching technical decision and our word is final. We're trying to take more of a collaborative approach, and when you make a change and a shift with this type of approach, it doesn't happen overnight. As you can appreciate, it's not as clean as you always want it to be, but with it being a work in progress and some targeted steps, as Adam said with phase 3, what we wanted to do with our mentorship piece and engagement from a technical staff coach to a volunteer coach is, one, work with them and say, look, you're the coach that works with those players and sees those players week in, week out. So you have some value in knowing, who your keener players are, who your players or which players might be struggling, and finding that level challenging. There's commitment items as well. And 9 times out of 10, when you get to see a player from an ongoing standpoint, you really have a good idea of, where that player might be. What we've wanted to try and eliminate, but it might be a reality, is just using the term tryouts or a one-off evaluation. That, from a evaluation standpoint, gives an opportunity to look at a player one time. And so that doesn't always give a true reflection of where they've been. So what we're looking at is giving some resources to the volunteer coaches from an assessment framework piece. And we won't look at it yet, Adam, but we'll move shortly onto a next slide that's called a player profile. And what that is a real generalized concept of the attributes of a player. So we're not trying to think real high level. We're just trying to say, okay, if we saw a player, what would their attributes be? Can we try and all look at this player and the players we have at the club in a similar lens, so that we can try and consistently look at the same items and determine where that player might be within their peer group and the observations of the volunteer coaches and the technical coaches. So, I've talked about engaging with the stakeholders. The continuous improvement piece for us is it's an ongoing process, and I think Adam will speak to it more, but we've had real good eyes on year 1 with practice environments. We want to try and evolve that more so in the game environments as well from a technical staff standpoint. So there's areas that we can focus on. Some of you hopefully have been aware that we communicated with parents to say, look, we're fresh, we're looking at the players. We want to know, where you might see your own son or daughter in the program. If they really show some commitments and desires to want to progress to higher levels, okay, let's find out where that might be. And then we've started to try and look at those players as well to see what that looks like from a technical standpoint. And overall, and Adam's echoed this, our real goal is to be player-centered. It's a term that is overused from my experiences in the game, and the term player-centered is, okay, so when we're making decisions, we're focusing on the players' best decisions at heart. And there's lots of variables and factors that come into play that might make that challenging to be a priority. But ultimately, if we keep saying, okay, move the needle, it's about the players, what's the best for this player, what's the best for the players as a group, taking in consideration what they need at that age as well. That's what we're always trying to do when we're making these decisions. Just what I would like to touch upon as well is the identification process that we're putting in place has sort of been tried and tested at higher levels. So with my old experience working for BC Soccer, we had a partnership with the Vancouver Whitecaps and with the BCSPL, which is the highest youth development league in the province, from U14 to U18. And we used a similar approach. So that was operational for about 8 years. And what we're trying to do here is look at that and say, how can we put that in place from a community club level? So just wanted to sort of share a bit of history to it. If I move on to the player profile piece, onto the next slide. This is, as I mentioned, like attributes of a player. And what we're trying to do is make it age appropriate. So on the left-hand side, person and technical, we're looking at the elements of a player from the younger ages. So really focusing on, you know, commitment. Does the player turn up? Are they often there at training? Commitment levels to the game itself as well, and their development as a player. Character, are they a good teammate? Consistency, you know, if they're performing or actioning a technical item, you know, what's the variable of them doing it often, which obviously, as you can appreciate, the more often a player can do an action with or without the ball that's the right action more often, you know, you'd look at that player and say, okay, they're a higher level player within the system that we have. You know, generic terms that hopefully we're all familiar with from a technical piece: receive, how they control it, can they dribble, when they're striking the ball with a shot or a pass, what's the technique of that? And then from a defensive standpoint, the press concept is how do they approach the player who has the ball when they're closest defender to try and win the ball back? Marking, do they mark the player? Do they mark space? Do they understand the awareness pieces to that? And then challenging, you know, the fun part or the uglier part of the game, tackling. How do they win the ball back when they're in a 1v1 situation? Packaging that with tactical and physical, that then gives us an idea of what a player might look like, typically in the 11v11 game, because the tactical component and positional awareness comes into play more. So do they understand their role on the field? Do they have vision to see the bigger picture, more players, more scenarios? Do they execute their technique from a decision standpoint? Let's just say it's a long pass and they're able to have the technique to find that longer pass to a forward in space. And then we have to consider physical pieces as well, with the demands of the game from an endurance. Can they keep their work rate up? The speed, are they fast? They utilize that long, short distances, and then strength from a competition standpoint as well. So by shaping a profile, and there's more detail behind this, which we shared on previous workshops with the coaches, it gives us an ability to say, right, look, this is what we'd like you to start to look at when we're looking at the players, so that we can talk about, well, how does the player receive the ball? Is it with their left foot? Is it with their right foot? Do they have some variety with it? Or are they a little bit more narrowed in only able to receive it with one foot and with one technique, as an example? So moving on to the player profile, and then looking at the observation chart. So this is just a little snapshot here of well, how might we observe and log some recordings on a player against those characteristics. So I've mentioned receiving the ball. We might have a player that's emerging, developing, and proficient. And what that potentially looks like is, if they're emerging, as I kind of used that example before, you know, do they struggle with basic concepts of the skill? Are they limited in the examples of how you can receive the ball? You know, one touch, two touch, inside, outside of the foot. Developing would be, you know, a player that is able to execute some of the receiving techniques and show a willingness to learn, i.e., you know, they're wanting to develop. And then you might have a player that's proficient, who, again, with the lens of looking at your team, and the players within that, you could say, well, you know, these 1 or 2 players here at the higher end are able to receive the ball, move a little bit quicker, dribble past the player as example, and it's happening more consistent. And so that might be a player that we say, well, is this challenge strong enough for them to help them develop? Or do we need to test them more to help them develop long term? And so that's, you know, really from a profile piece, we're trying to say, look, this is what we want to look at. This is how we're going to look at it and log it down and record it. And then we've got one more slide here just with the process. And again, this is a snapshot of a bigger system, but what we're trying to implement and what we did when I worked with BC Soccer, you had your BC Soccer staff, you had your white cap staff and the BCSPL coaches, and we would try and package all this information together and then share it in the right avenues so that there can be a sort of healthy discussion on, okay, technical staff have observed this player, the volunteer coaches have observed the players in this capacity. There's some consistencies there. Okay, I think that helps us with some comfort to make a final decision on how the players would be selected for a team. As I stressed before, this is our first year in implementing it. You know, there's been change, and so we're still working through the process, and it will improve over time. But ultimately, what I wanted to just share, and we have, you know, shared it in other workshops and some communication via video, but just wanted to make a point today that, you know, this is the process we're looking to put in place. And there is a lot of, you know, intent with transparency, incorporating groups from a variety of viewpoints on the players to help us make the best decision. That for me is, I'll just double check the player identification piece, and I'll pass it back over to Adam just to speak to long-term planning and cover a wider set of items there.
That's great. Thanks, Chris. Yeah, so as we, you know, we've mentioned sort of some of the roots and the foundations of what we want to try and achieve, and, you know, how we're going to get there. And I think it's important as we build in the sort of the long-term player development piece of what's to come, and additional sort of services, supplementary training, all things outside of the norm of training with your team and then playing on the weekend. So what you see in front of you here, and I'll talk to them a little bit more in detail, is the academy, position specific programming, and futsal. These 3 things have been achieved this year already. So when we came into the club, we, you know, one of the memos was to really, for want of a better phrase, get a hold of the academy and really change what that looks like. Wanting to improve upon it, wanting to provide the additional training, but aligned with our overall philosophy. So, you know, and I make no qualms of saying words like world class. What does that mean? You know, world class can be anything from working with world class players or delivering a world class training session to an 8-year-old. And I'm not shy about saying that, and I'm not too arrogant about saying it either. I look at it, go, if I was asked to go and run a session for under 8s at Arsenal Football Club under 8s is some of the best under 8s in world football. So if I'd be happy to deliver a session to those under 8s at Arsenal, and I deliver, and Chris and our staff deliver that same session to under 8s at South Delta, that's a world-class training session. And I have no issues with saying that. And I've been around the academy a lot this year. I'm really happy with the staff. I've been really happy with the curriculum that Chris has put on there. And the academy is a little bit different to a regular training session. It is more individual, sort of specialized, and scrutiny is on the development of the player as opposed to the team or the group. But we've done that. I've been really, really happy with how that's looked this year, and we'll continue to shape that and mold that how we really want it to go. There was maybe a bit more of bridging the gap of what it was and where we want it to be. But I've been very, very happy with how that's unfolded this year. Position-specific programming, I think it's the natural sort of gap within group dynamics is how do you work on what you need to work on in that setting. Reality is our teams have an hour's training session, so you could dedicate an hour to doing position specific work, but as a club we wanted to provide those additional resources, and what we launched, I believe there might have been a version in the past, but we introduced the goalkeeper striker program, and so that's very much catered towards those two positions. It's finishers finishing, it's crossing and finishing, it's different actions of finishing, things that you really can't get out within an hour in your team session. So for example, the finishers would be doing, cutback finishing or cross finishing, aerial finishing, headers, volleys, all that type of individual work. And then for the goalkeepers, receiving goalkeeping instruction when there, and then being faced directly against the striker. So a lot of those in decision making and reading of cues and whatnot in that setting. So that's something we've launched. It's the easiest one to launch in terms of opposing each other. But you look at midfielders, you look at wingers, you look at defenders. There's different position specific programs that can be built, and I think they will as they go. Again, all aligned to the technical vision, the technical plan. And then at the bottom of the screen, there we look at futsal. Something I would love to bring in. I loosely call it futsal/indoor football, because I think futsal is its own animal in many respects. But indoor football reduces time and space. And when you reduce time and space, the critical thinkers come alive. And everything that you try and sort of manufacture as a coach, indoor automatically gives you that. It's small-sided. There's small numbers. There's less time. There's less space. I love it. I think it's something that should be incorporated within the club once a week in its sort of simplistic, regular format. Something we may look to do more often next year. But we've added futsal. It's been fantastic feedback. The people have, given us the response of how fast it is, how intense it is, and they're all the metrics of, putting players in difficult situations. So there are 3 that we've executed already. What we want to continue to do is offer more, have really good quality control, and try and give the sort of the overriding feeling that whatever you may need as a family, as a parent of a player, you can have here. So if I look at some objectives for us, we're talking about small group work. So we've got position specific work, but we're talking about small group work. So 2 to 4 players, detail orientated, little extra kind of zoning in on players' technique. We are probably 90% confident that we'll have this running in spring with one of our coaches who's got a vast amount of experience in this type of work. But, the con of the group is there's 15 players, there's 10 players. That individual detail just isn't there in a group session. So if you want a little bit extra, you can go and take those sessions, and then you're looking, at 2, 3, 4 players to 1 coach ratio. The detail is now there. Those little nuances that separate players. So that's something we hope to have for the spring of this year. Staff-led practices, again, coming in. I think there was a level of uncertainty with what had gone on in the club and what needs to go on. But I think we want to try and increase the amount of staff that can lead sessions and again, collaborate with the volunteer. We're very hopeful that we'll be able to increase that, certainly in ratio when we come to the spring. Obviously, spring being a lighter load in general, but wanting to get more staff out there with the volunteers. The ID processes, frequency of game day visits. Again, coming into the initial budget, I prioritized the budget being with training sessions this year purposely. That the weekend game activity has not been inclusive of that, and that's something we would love to change, to give game day support, game day advice and guidance, and that's something hopefully we can add as we move into the spring, but certainly into next fall, winter. Multi-sport programming. People hear from me like we have to be very careful with overdoing it and specializing. Like that you can train somebody 5-6 days a week in football at 8 and they'll be phenomenal. They'll have early success. But studies will show us that they're not the players that are surviving at 16, 17 or playing until they're 36, 46. They're the ones that burn out and give up. So I want to be mindful of multi-sport. There'll be 2 avenues that will progress with the club. There will be multi-sport programming. It's something I've delivered very successfully at other clubs. And for example, one that we used was a football. So it was a football and basketball split, keeping the multi-sport aspects of clubs alive. It is important. We definitely do not want to over-specialize. That being said, we go into some injury prevention tools. This is something that I will definitely incorporate into the fall winter. Doing some light prehabilitation work is something I want to bring in. We play on turf fields. They're not fantastic for players, particularly female players. To counter that, you've got to be strengthening the body as we go. So it's something I've incorporated in every club and every team that I've worked with. And if you watch any high-level sport, it doesn't matter what sport it is in this day and age, they'll always begin their prehab with resistance therabands. And it's something that can be done 2-3 times a week for 5-10 minutes before training. You're doing 15 to 30 minutes of injury prevention work per week. And for the parents on here, just doing that alone is an 85% improvement or resistant of injuries in players. And anyone who's a parent of someone who has done a knee injury, you'll spend 8 months doing resistant work, and it's not fun. And so we'll introduce those as we go into next year, but injury prevention will be something that we want to incorporate into the club. Some extra work. So it's modified the game day culture. Look, we tried to make some early changes. We got a little bit of stick from parents and volunteers. And I think we have to change the culture of the game. I've had so many conversations with families, with coaches that will say, we need more players. And I'll go, how many players you have? And I'll use an 11-a-side example. They go, we have 12 players. Why do you need more players? We need to have more subs. Players get gassed. For me, that is a culture that we need to change. You as parents come to watch your children play the game. The minimum that we expect our children to play is 50%. The idea and the ideology in this is players are playing 75 to 100% of a match day. I'll speak from my perspective as a parent. When I come to watch my kid play any sport, I want to watch them play the sport as often as they can. I don't want to watch them watching other kids play the sport. The only way you learn is by playing. The only way you practice and perfect is by doing. And the only way you become fit enough and physically demanding of the game is to play. And that is a culture shift that needs to happen in the club, because I don't want 16, 17, 18 players and you've got 7 subs on the bench. I would love it if we have 13, 14, wiggle room for some injuries. But we should have the mentality that we want our players to play every minute of every game. That's something we want to change the culture of as we move forward. Increase the player ball ratio game day. So in the younger ones, again, as I started off, we took a little bit of flack at the beginning, and we had some feedback that we want to see the real game. We want to play a game. And I would go and watch like an under 7 game or an under 8, and there'll be 5v5, and then there's 5 subs on the bench. And I always try and educate people from a numbers perspective. So if there's 5 players on the pitch and there's 5 subs, the maximum that your player, your kid, your son, your daughter is going to play is 50%. That is the maximum that they could play today. For me, that's not enough. So we tried to break this down in small numbers. Maybe there's 2 5v5 games going on. Now you get an injury, you get a sickness or whatever. Okay, well, let's drop down to 4v4. 4v4 is actually better than 5v5 because there's 2 less players on the field, which means there's more interaction with the ball. So something as we move forward next year, certainly in younger age groups, we want to get down to 2v2s, to 3v3s. And coincidentally, as this year has gone on, we've had the German Football Association change their youth structures. We're now at U7, U8, they are playing 3v3 and 4v4. The Northern Ireland Federation have changed it. The English FA have changed it. So by no means am I sitting there saying we were ahead of the game. What I'm saying is these are major football powerhouses that have restructured their game day activity for younger players because they don't want it to look like the elite game. They're kids. They need interaction with the ball. They need as much sort of repetition and experiences as they can. So the lower the number, the better. And I do appreciate it looks less like the game. But the long-term development as a player is if they touch a ball 100 times every U5 game, 100 times every U6 game, 100 times every U7 games over that hour play, their development will be accelerated when they get to U8, U9, U10. And globally, if I'm talking about what I've seen in this last year, we need a lot of improvement with our players technically and game understanding. How you do that is you've got to give them more experiences and more practice when they're younger. And so there'll be some changes as we move forward on what is the game day activity. So on this one here, Chris, I'm just going to pass back to you on the Canada Soccer Club license piece.
Yeah, thanks, Adam. So I can see we're going to have some questions about the BCSPL. Just for those that don't know what the BCSPL is, it's the BC Soccer Premier League. It's been in existence for about, don't quote me here, maybe about 12 years. And it's targeted at the U14 to U18 ages. And clubs can operate a franchise within the BCSPL. And why would a club do that? Well, it attracts the highest level of play. The competition is against the highest level of play within the province. There's around 16 clubs at the moment within this level. Opportunity to go to the highest level of provincial nationals. They actively work with the BC Soccer Provincial Programme for identification and the Vancouver Whitecaps as well. A big component to the BCSPL is the clubs need to deliver around 110 criteria across governance, operations and technical standards. So where we're at as a club, and I reference the club licensing, the BCSPL is the National Youth Club license. So that's the highest designation a youth club can obtain. There are 3 layers leading into that. And as we came into the club, we needed to make sure that we got our ducks in a row and renewed the lowest level, which is the quality for soccer designation. Formally, the club haven't been designated that yet because they were still in the old operating concept with a BC Soccer designation. So we've had to upgrade that concept. And then the hierarchy of the club licensing process has a timeline and demonstration of designation that the club will have to meet if the goal is to run a BCSPL franchise. I can tell you from experience that will be a 4 to 5 year process if that is a target for the club. And in speaking with the club leads, there is a level below the BCSPL that targets the U10 to U13 age groups, and it's called a skills centre, very much looking at higher levels of technical standard with what a development environment looks like for the U10 to U13 ages, you know, looking at the academy, looking at the team programming. So we are having discussions to say, well, realistically, that's an attainable option to get us on this BCSPL path if that is the option. So the skills centre is something that we're discussing. With the BCSPL pathway as it stands, and I can only speak on this from a technical standpoint, but at this stage, there's no partnership that the club currently have. And from a wider perspective, with 16 franchises, there's opportunity for players, if they want to register their intent to play at the highest level within the BCSPL, they can contact the BCSPL clubs, and there's an opportunity to register your interest. And then the collaborative approach with the BCSPL clubs is sort of technical director to technical director would discuss that player's intent, and if that club are interested for an opportunity for either an observation or a potential selection. But what I would just highlight with club licensing is it is a new process that's come in the last 3 to 4 years. It's very heavy in documentation from a governance, operations and technical standpoint. And so that takes time and efforts to make sure that the club, from a number of people working in a number of areas, document, put in process so that we can get these designations to demonstrate to yourselves as members that we're providing a product and operating at a higher level with evidence to that. But also for us technically, the higher you work within the club licensing system, the higher you demonstrate you're providing a better program technically. And at this stage, the club are at level 1, and there's 4 levels. So we are targeting a methodical approach to see how we tackle that moving forward. That's it for me on club licensing.